Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased and honored to welcome you to our new and the last episode of debates conducted within our Polish-Korean cooperation known as Korea Monitor. The project is funded by UniKorea grant financed by the UniKorea Foundation, which was allocated to the Warsaw Institute Foundation and explores the European perspective on Korean unification. I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome our today's guests, who are Mr. Johann Brandt, Managing Director of the Institute of Applied Geopolitical Studies, IEGA, from France. Good afternoon, Johann. And Mr. Jong-Ba Lee, Research Manager at the Korea Young Leaders Forum and advisor to the National Unification Advisory Council from Seoul. In our case, good evening, Mr. Lee.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
My name is Szymon Polewka, and I am pleased to moderate today's debate titled The Future of Korean Unification. So, dear Mr. Briand, dear Mr. Lee, and dear viewers, through the Korea Monitor project funded by the UniKorea Foundation, we focus on the prospects for Korean unification. I would like to commence with the question of whether there has been a historical moment since the division of Korea when unification could have become a reality. We will begin with Mr. Lee.
Okay, so if we look back at the 1990s, there was indeed a period that created some hope for reconciliation. So in 1991, both Koreas joined the United Nations and signed the Basic Agreement, which emphasized the reconciliation, non-aggression, and cooperation. A few years later, in 1994, the United States and North Korea reached the Geneva Agreed Framework, aiming to freeze North Korea's nuclear activities in exchange for energy assistance. These steps suggested the possibility that North Korea might step away from developing nuclear weapons and focus instead on engagement. However, the sudden death of Kim Il Sung in 1994, combined with the North's internal instability and its continuing emphasis on regime survival, I think it caused the momentum for unification to fade away at that moment. At the same time, the United States was more focused on nuclear non-proliferation over unification, so which limited the scope of progress, I guess. So I believe that if there had been a stronger follow through the both in inter-Korean relations and in collaboration with the United States, there might have been a slightly greater chance for unification to become a reality, though it was still an extremely difficult goal.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And Mr. Briand, what is your French perspective here?
Well, first of all, thank you, Simon, for the invitation. I'm glad to take part in this debate, in this discussion. I will start with a maybe provocative answer. Bear with me a second. I think, well, if we take a look, if we consider through a historical perspective, I think one of the major steps towards unification was the war. It was a step, and because it answered a few questions, and it's still something that we need to consider today when we consider the unification of Korea. The war showed that, well, basically it highlighted the strategic value of the Korean peninsula. We know that during the 19th century, early 20th, Korea was prey to various imperialism, European and from Japan as well. After the war, when Korea regained its independence, it became another flashpoint during the Cold War. And this is enlightening. Why? Because we know that there are three major actors that will probably always take part in the general politics regarding Korea and its strategic value: the United States, China, and Russia. We can add Japan, although it's a little more ambivalent. We'll probably come back to that later. But if we look at all the late 19th century, 20th century, and even the recent efforts in the early 21st century, we see that these three actors are always taking part. And so, of course, we have strategic resources in Korea. It's a gateway to the Pacific, to the Arctic in some way. These are important factors, but they're not the entire thing. The Korean question, I think, cannot be divided from the geopolitical and international perspective of the United States, China, and Russia. So, what did the war answer? As a question, it showed that it's not working. The war is not an effective mean for unification. We show that it will most surely draw a response from the three actors. Nobody wants it. First of all, the Koreans, but even foreign actors don't want it either. And the war also showed that it helped crystallize the unification as a identity measure. In the same way, you can't think unification without thinking about the identity politics behind it. We were talking about two very different states, but they share culture. They share a cultural attachment too. It's interesting when you consider North Korea to see how, despite their still revolutionary perspective, they are still deeply attached to Korean cultural aspects. So they're not trying to break away from that. And the war also showed that both Koreas are still very attached to this cultural Korean identity. And just to add a little on what Mr. Lee said, I think we can also, that's something that is, I wouldn't say well known in France and in Western Europe in general, I would say, but there is the Sunshine Policy period from 1998 to 2008, if I'm not mistaken. Why is this important? Because in the same way, we have a period where the United States, Russia, and China were positive forces towards these politics. Although the United States changed in the end, Russia wasn't very active, I would say, and Japan was ambivalent from the start. And nuclear missile firing from North Korea surely didn't help. But it showed that if we have all these actors working together towards the goal of unification, we can move forward in that direction. So I think these are very important, and it will highlight that the question of unification is very context heavy. You can't really just transpose initiatives from one period to the other. We absolutely need to consider the global geopolitics and the general state of the international order, if you want to consider this question.
So thank you very much. And gentlemen, to elaborate what you said, referring to those moments, so what stood in the way of unification, like in all of those moments during the Sunshine Policy time or the War of 50s, Mr. Bryant?
Well, just to follow up on what I said previously, it's basically foreign influence. Foreign influence is a major deterrent to the unification question, and it can also be a force of change. I will take a little, I would say, a cynical approach to the question, but without first United Nations intervention and later China's intervention, Korea would already be unified. Under one regime or the other, I wouldn't say it would be the best outcome, but it would be unified. So foreign intervention matters, and it keeps mattering. And this is all because of the strategic value of the peninsula itself. And like I said, this strategic value keeps evolving, but it's still there. If we consider the peninsula today, we have two major actors of the international system. North Korea is a force, is actual force that needs to be reckoned with. It now, even though with Ukraine war, we can see that it has a capacity of influence beyond its immediate surrounding. And South Korea is a major actor as well. Just looking at the tech sector, where it's a champion, and I'm not even going into the influence and soft power aspects. No need to delve on that. But yeah, two major actors. It's also a major flashpoint, like I said, during the Cold War, and even now, when we consider the Indo-Pacific region, we can see a lot of tensions are converging towards the Korean Peninsula. For a long time, it was basically all about the North, and now Mr. Lee will maybe correct me, but from what I've gathered, it seems to me that because of Trump's erratic behavior, there has been a lot of talks about nuclearization of the South, because there's a growing feeling of abandonment from the United States. And it seems to me, I mean, from what I've read, that many people in Korea, I don't know about the government, but society at least, feel that the United States might not be there to protect them in case of an attack from the North. So yeah, there's another aspect. I think I will delve on that later, but it's also changes in society, in identity. And I think an important point is that there is no clear definition about what unification means. Is it one country? Is it a political, economical union, such as the European Union, for instance, or something else? It's a blur. And this surely isn't helping.
So thank you, Johan, for that interesting perspective, especially connected with UN intervention. And Mr. Lee, Korean perspective here.
Okay, so I totally agree with Mr. Yuan Brandt, because geopolitical issues are very important in playing a role of unification of Korea. The thing is, usually the international community acts usually on accordance with own interests, right? Trump as well is acting and trying to make conversation with the North Korean government is to, of course, it's somewhat in part of the beneficial things with the United States. So since Mr. Yuan tackled on the geopolitical issue, I will try to more focus on the internal Korean South and North issue. So when it comes to historical issues and obstacles, honestly, while we've touched short moments on history that seem to open a window towards unification, I believe that in reality, there was never a truly viable path to actual unification. Because even the periods we discussed were more about tactical reconciliation rather than genuine steps toward merging into one nation. The main historical obstacle is the fundamental question of, what we also have discussed just now, is who would lead the unified Korea. So both South and North have their own systems and leadership, and it's been, for years, more than decades. So in the North's case, any moves toward peace or even conflict were largely strategic, aimed at easing sanctions or gaining certain concessions. Never about genuine unification, just my opinion, of course. But their primary goal has always been regime survival, and that means maintaining control rather than merging with the South on equal terms. On the other hand, South Korea is also unlikely to accept a scenario where the North retains any form of government power. So as a result, the idea of unification has always been more of a theoretical concept, unless one side collapsed entirely, much like the East German, case. So given the situation right now, I think there are many obstacles, but the main obstacle is who will take control when Korea unifies.
Okay, so thank you very much. As I already see that we answered the question connected with the historical obstacles, I would like to continue with the question about the challenges that are unfolding today. What obstacles does Korea currently face on its path to unification, Mr. Bryant?
Well, I think if we're thinking current, well, there's a lot of things to be said about Korean society. I think we'll have the opportunity also to tackle these issues later. So I will just focus again on international aspects mostly. Um, well, like I mentioned briefly, it's also about, I mean, and just like Mr. Lee said, it's the unification is a strategic and a tactical question for both Korean governments and also for the surrounding countries. And currently, I think we are in a in a time where we're facing a global reshaping of partnerships and a general instability in the world order. And nobody wants more instability. I mean, we often put the blame on the evil axis, China going to all the way to Russia, accusing them of wanting to change the world order and such. It, it's it's um, it's a limited perspective, I think. If you look at the members, I would say, of this club, we can see that there are also tensions. Um, there is a major shift happening between in the Russia-China relation. North Korea is trying, that's my perspective at least, to wrestle a little bit of leeway from both Russia and China. It needs China for survival, and it's growing closer and closer to Russia. And that's probably something that China is looking at with not fear, absolutely not, but a little circumspection, sorry. Especially considering that Russia is also moving towards the Indo-Pacific. It's just getting back to this idea of having a port to the Red Sea. It is also just forging ties with Myanmar and such. So there are shifts. There are shifts in this region, and like I said, Korea is a strategic flashpoint. So nobody wants something that is, I mean, I would say still a pillar of world relations to change. Because, like Mr. Lee said, we have no idea what will happen. Even if we think of a collapse from the north, we have no idea what this collapse would mean. Does it mean the entire Kim family dies? What happened to the military then? Surely they won't just leave the power. So there are a lot of things to be considered then, and I think the current state of the world isn't in favor of a unification, of a, I would say, international effort towards unification. Status quo is better for everybody at the moment, and I think even for the Koreans themselves, because there are issues within the societies. We'll come back to that later, but just to conclude on that, I think for all the people who are listening to us, considering this question of unification, we need to step back from the idea that all Korean wants unifications or South Korean want to unite and the North doesn't want it. It's way more complicated than that. And not to mention that, well, when West and East Germany united, there was no precedent. And now I think the Korean society is taking a look at what's happening in Germany. And there are issues with the unification still in German society. So that's something that needs to be considered as well on a practical standpoint here.
And Mr. Lee, do you find any points to add here? I see that we have some problem with the voice, so maybe we can check whether it's everything on. So try to turn off and
Oh,
turn
sorry.
on.
Yes.
And now
So
it's
I
worked.
think
So
Mr. Yes, yeah. So I think Mr. Yuan discussed much more on the topic, and I think I would say this is also historical because the changing mood, the shifting mood of the international geopolitical issues, and the mood itself in Korean Peninsula is also shifting. So when you consider incidents like the abrupt shutdown of Kaesong Industry Complex and North Korea's recent reference to the so-called two-state theory, it seems clear that the path to unification is becoming increasingly more difficult. So the issue right now is also historically there have been a lot of obstacles, but unlike Germany, their unification happened very quickly. But Korea, we've been divided for a long time. So when it comes to, well, I think we'll be discussing this again in the later part. But I think the time, well, people say time heals, but this time I think it's the opposite.
and like having this Korean perspective, do you see any notable steps that are being pursued at present when it comes to unification policy?
Well,
Mr.
on
Lee?
the okay, mm, Korea's efforts on unification.
Steps
Unification
are
through
being
several
pursued.
key.
Yes.
Yes. Uh, so could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Okay, I think that we have maybe some problem with the connection here, so I will repeat the question one more time. So, what notable steps are being pursued at present when it comes to unification policy?
In Korea. So, okay, so the government has laid out some framework called the Fourth Basic Plan for the Development of Inter-Korean Relations for the years 2023 to 2027. So, as part of the 2025 implementation, the focus is on promoting North Korea's denuclearization, normalizing the inter-Korean relations based on principles of reciprocity. So, addressing humanitarian issues and preparing for unification in collaboration with the public and international partners. So, in addition to this, public engagement efforts are also ongoing. So, for example, the National Unification Advisory Council recently held a public forum to foster national consensus on unification. And the Unification Education Center also has been running educational programs for youth. And on the international front, South Korea is also holding high-level dialogues, such as recent talks in, actually not really recent, but talks in Tokyo to strengthen cooperation with neighboring countries on unification and North Korea's the policies for North Korea. So humanitarian support for North Korean defectors is also being enhanced with new mental health and employment programs being launched. So while these measures show a strong commitment, challenges like North Korea's resistance and the need for sustained international support remains significant.
And Mr. Briand, European perspective here?
I think all initiative that would favor the rekindling of a national link between the two Koreans towards a sort of unified Korean feeling of belonging is a good step. It's basically the only thing that is manageable right now. Like I said, because of the international climate, another thing. But I think it was very recent. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the South at the border there used to be like a diffusion of messages, and I think it was cancelled like not so long ago. Like the South stopped diffusing those messages. It's symbolic, but in the same way that the unified hockey team was symbolic, or the K-pop concert at the border was symbolic. Those symbol matters. Identity politics and is all about symbols, and the feeling of belonging, the national identity feelings just thrive on symbols. It's all it works basically. So I think all of those steps are necessary. First, because it's kind of rekindling also the feeling of a closeness between the two Koreas in the younger generations. We'll I think tackle these issues later, but this is a major topic. I think a lot of people are wondering why should we reunite with the North, and also because it's still it shows that there are still initiatives and that the question still matters. It would be, I think, very easy just to create some kind of a phantom ministry that would just basically do nothing about this. But these issues, symbolic issues, and also humanitarian efforts, like Mr. Lees mentions, I think they are very important. And like I mentioned, I think they are the only thing that we can do right now.
So, gentlemen, moving on the crux of today's debate, the future of Korean unification, at this point I would like to refer to data published by Korean Institute for our National Unification. As the Institute reports, since 2020, the public perception of the necessity of unification has hit its lowest point. The war generation showed the most proactive attitude towards unification, with 73% believing it is necessary. However, as age decreases, the perception necessity of unification diminished. Only 46% of millennials saw unification as necessary. So, considering quoted change in public sentiment, could this trend alter the South Korean national course towards unification, Mr. Brandt?
It could very much alter it. It's very hard to have a perspective on how the world will evolve and how international environments will favor or not unification. Even though we can see that for the next, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years, probably won't. But it's very important that feeling the feeling of need towards unification stays relevant in Korean society. The younger generation hasn't known the war, and it also doesn't know the dictatorship. He only knows democracy and military service, and I think one is something they want to protect, and the other one is a core. Even though I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are still positive feelings towards the military service, but still it's very long, it's a core, and it creates some kind of an imbalance in society, because you can skip it for a time if you do studies, but then you do it later. It's complicated. And we are currently in an age where individual matters and individual needs matter. This can also be connected to demographic issue that we'll mention later. But then there are many obstacles that are growing inside Korean society against the idea that the unification matters. Not even that it's a priority, but only that it matters. And like I mentioned, we have now the example of East Germany, where Germany as a whole is still paying for the pensions from former East Germany. And this is something that will probably happen in case of unification with the North, considering that the most likely scenario is a collapse from the North. And I put, of course, on the likeliness of this event. But then there also is political aspects in the unification. If you look at the political map of Germany, you can see that most anti-democratic forces are concentrated in the east, in the former East Germany. That's where the AfD is most powerful. And we're talking about a far-right party that is on many aspects, very against democratic principles and state of law. And considering how democracy is becoming very important for the younger generation in Korea, I doubt that they are willing to take the risks. I think also that there are still a difficulty to adapt and to accept the refugees from the north. There's still a lot of social imbalances between the refugees and the South Korean natives, to put it simply. So they are also, beside the economic aspects that is obvious, won't delve on that, there also is the social and cultural aspects. And I think that this feeling is only natural. The feeling that the question shouldn't be a priority is only natural, and that the politics we mentioned earlier, the symbolic politics, are the only thing that can prevent it from this feeling for growing more and more. And so that this is why these politics are important, and that it still needs to be a national cause. Otherwise, the question will just fade away from consciousness, and people will just keep living with it. In any case.
So, Mr. Lee, having in mind that you are the part of the Korean younger generation, so what is your perspective here?
Okay, so where to begin? So, of course, public support is indeed crucial for unification. So, in case of Germany, there was at least a certain level of consensus among citizens that unification was desirable, even though challenges arose during the process. This underlying public agreement made it a bit more easier for them to accept the hardships that came with integration. But as mentioned, right now the younger generation of in Korea, the one who will be really leading the country in the future, often do not really feel a strong justification or motivation for unification because younger generation who never experienced the war see North Korea as a fundamentally different country. They question the tangible and once as mentioned by Mr. Yohan that economic problem might be some not really that big thing, but it's really a big thing for the young generation right now, because the big question is that the tangible benefits of unification and the burdens that the younger generation might get from that is somewhat it's pressuring the younger generation about the unification of Korean Peninsula. So they think that, or we think that maybe caring for the North rather than gaining clear advantages would be very disadvantageous for South Korea. So as a result, there is a declining sense of urgency and necessity for unification in the South, because South itself is experiencing a lot of difficulties in social conflicts and also economic problems, and also if you check the suicidal rates, I mean, objectively, North Koreans, they have less food, so it seems like people would feel bad about that. But right now, younger generations, they focus more on their own sufferings. So it's kind of hard to really persuade the younger generation on the justification of unification. So if unification were to happen without building certain consensus, it could lead to a social friction and prejudice against North Koreans, creating new social conflicts. So in other words, ensuring that there is a broad public understanding and support for unification is essential, is quite needed. Yes. So without it, pushing for unification could be seen as reckless and may lead to unintended social divisions among the Korean people. Yes.
So here's very interesting point that you touch, Mr. Lee. Maybe Mr. Briand will confirm that it is visible all of the Western world, the crisis of the mental health, And it is how we perceive, and maybe it's similar in France, the South Korea as a part of the West. So those processes also hit the Korean society. So it's not the only obstacles or the crisis that is visible only in South Korea, but it also touches in Europe. And as I said, we are see the South Korea as together with Japan as a part of the Western world. And at this point, I would also like to touch upon the current demographic crisis, which is affecting the entire developed world and Europe, but is particularly visible in South Korea. So, could shrinking Korean population also pose challenges for unification, Mr. Lee?
Okay, so in some ways, the demographic challenges South Korea faces, such as low birth rates and an aging population, could be framed as a reason for considering unification more seriously. So while we often talk about using AI and robotics to address labor shortages, these solutions will, of course, take time to fully implement. So in the meantime, immigration is one possible approach, but it can also lead to social tensions. Actually, there are social tensions about this right now. And we should not, the thing is, we should not really view North Koreans merely as a labor force. But if unification happens, the integration could help alleviate some demographic pressure and benefit South Korea's economy. So by highlighting this aspect, we might be able to persuade younger generations who are otherwise skeptical about unification. They may see it not just as historical or emotional issue, but as a practical solution to some of the demographic and economic challenges we face. So in this way, building a broader consensus on unification, it could be a different strategy rather than that what we have right now, but it might actually persuade some of the younger generations in Korea, South Korea.
Mr. Brandt?
Yeah. There's two aspects I think that matters when thinking about these demographics. The first one is the impacts of a demographic crisis, and this impact is twofold. There's the economic impact, and considering the health system and also the pension system, and this makes me circle back to what I mentioned earlier with the needs that the South Korean would have to pay for the North Korean to stand it up. So that's a negative aspect, I would say. The other thing is that a demographic crisis also creates an imbalance in the way different categories of people are being represented and their political weight. So this could also play in favor of a positive sentiment towards unification, because the older generation could have a say that would certainly be disproportionate, but would be more representative of their weight in society. So it's already ambivalent. But just to follow up on what Mr. Lee said, there is, of course, a demographic crisis, and what it means on an economical standpoint and identity for identity politics as well is a major situation in Western Europe. I think I'm not just breaking news here, but we can also see it can be linked to the rise of far-right parties in Western Europe, and seeing how the immigration question is polarizing societies in the entire Western Europe. Of course, it would be much, I think, easier for the entire society to accept immigrants who share, a similar ethnic background, and of course speak the same language and already have the cultural codes, although there's a massive gap in social codes, of course, but that's still something. And this led me to what I mentioned earlier. Maybe the question is not is to rethink what unification would mean. Maybe some kind of a monetary economical union between the two governments would help foster the idea that unification is an important matter, because it would help just some kind of a workflow, and then it would help just some kind of mixing between the two different societies. So it's a complex problematic. I think if we consider the whole thing, it has a lot of negative aspects, but it can also be a positive force. And I think these positive aspects can outweigh the negative if they are, politics that will go in that way. But it also need to be, there's a pedagogical effort to be made from the South Korean government, just to explain why this would be a good thing and why this matters, basically.
So, gentlemen, at this point, bearing in mind all what you have touched upon in this debate, I would like to ask whether peaceful unification of Korea Peninsula is possible. I think that Johan has partially answered this question, so maybe we will start here with Mr. Lee.
Okay, so I don't want to be cynical, but I think peaceful unification would be quite challenging in reality, because one possible scenario is the German style absorption, right? So when unification happens because one side collapses, then if that were to happen, the chaos from the North Korean collapse could actually spill over into the South, making the unification process extremely turbulent. And on the other hand, if we try a gradual cooperation, as Mr. Yuan Brand mentioned, like the Kaesong Industrial Complex model, we actually have tried that before, right? So there's always a risk that a single incident could derail the entire process. So North Korea has previously reversed the cooperative efforts abruptly. And such setbacks could mean that even a step-by-step unification plan might fail. So in short, I believe that a truly peaceful unification is not very realistic under current circumstances.
And Mr. Bian, do you have anything to add here?
Well, I agree. On the positive note, I would say that it is the peaceful unification is the only way unification would work. But I agree with Mr. Lee. I don't think it's realistic at the moment. There are too many obstacles, and the problem being that these obstacles will probably endure in the next few decades. I think if we look at the scenarios of unification, we have to consider that something we might forget when we compare it to the North, but South Korea is still a young democracy. And it went through a very important political crisis, and there might be a need to rework some of the institutional process and the institutional works of the Korean democracy. It might be, incorporating a collapsed North might be too much for the country at its current state. And of course, just for the sake of the argument, if we consider a collapse of the South and a integration from the North, that would be the same thing. That would be chaos, and there are absolutely no way any of the foreign countries would let it happen. That's something that also needs to be said. We probably should have talked about it a little earlier, but. The South has a lot of value as well for countries such as China, Japan, and also Russia. It's not only the North that matters to Russia and China. So we can't imagine that these actors will be content with anything but the status quo in the next few years, I think.
And As we conclude this debate, how would you assess the prospect for the future unification of the Korea Peninsula, Mr. Piant?
The prospects, I think they look very dire. I think nothing will happen. We touched about that earlier, and I think Mr. Lee was very right when he mentioned the different initiatives, humanitarian and the like. I think the only way we can make progress towards unification is through these policies. First, we need to unify. To work towards a social and cultural unification. Things just very simple. We talked about the Kaesong complex, but other than that, there was also tourist trips from the south to the north. Just having the possibility of doing this again would be a major step and would help the surviving of the cause, basically, in South Korean society, because it's what it is now. It's going to be extinct in the next few years if nothing is being done. So I think that's the only thing that's possible right now. Political unification, whether it's from the collapse of the south or the north, or step by step, we've saw that it's not something that's realistic right now. I'm not even talking about military unification, of course. So yeah, that's the only prospect, I think.
Maybe to add a little bit more positive perspective here, I think that in Germany we had a very similar point that in 80s there were even the survey made that the people also didn't believe that the unification will happen at any point, and at the end it happened so suddenly. And we also touched this topic in the previous debates here. And as we see, we live now in a very dynamic world, and we have so many so-called black swamps that appear and that changing totally the dynamic of international relations and also domestic relations. So we'll see what the future will bring here. And your last word here, Mr. Lee.
About your last question, right? So
About
my
the prospect
point of view,
of
the future. Okay,
Yes.
so it's really a complex, problem. So, and I think it's not just about how South Korea and North Korea might negotiate or cooperate. It's also about preparing South Korean society to accept the unification. So I think we need to build public consensus and figure out how to help people embrace the idea naturally. Moreover, it's not just, I guess, it's bilateral issue. International geopolitical add another layer of the complexity. I think Mr. Yuan Bryant dealt this a while ago. So, for example, China may not want to see unified Korea, or leaning towards democracy right on its border. And while the U.S. might support unification, but maybe the dynamics might change with the political issues as well. So I think South Korea need to prepare in both ways, while working hard to pursue other nations to help us unify, and also start to pursue the younger generation of Korea to try to accept unification in a more positive way.
Okay, so thank you very much, gentlemen. And I would like to once again thank you for your contribution to our seventh debate. This debate was the last planned for the current edition of the Korea Monitor project. And as for you, dear viewers, we encourage you to support initiatives related to Korean unification. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you at the future initiatives. Thank you. Dziękuję.
Thank you.
Thank you.